order the September 7th meeting for the Trails and Greenways Committee of Newtown Township. Start with roll call. Anthony DiVincenzo, Chair, present.
John Custer,
Here.
Beth Dungisa, here. Joe Falcon,
Here.
Terry McCarthy, Mark Carr,
Here.
Aaron Cook is present. Leah Archer, absent, and Joe Kuszewski, absent.
Now I ask for a moment of silence, please. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item, number 4, agenda, consider approving the agenda for today's meeting. I don't know if anybody has any comments or additions to that. Do I hear a motion to approve? Okay, motion by Mr. Carr, seconded Beth Dungisa. Thank you. And all in favor of approving the agenda? Aye. Aye. Hearing no opposed, ayes have it. Agenda is approved. Moving on to number 5, the public comment for agenda items only. We have somebody from our community here. No comment? Okay. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. All right. Hearing no comment and assuming, Mr. Bradley, we haven't gotten emails, correct?
I didn't do anything else.
Oh, we're not doing that anymore? Okay, good to know. Thank you. On to,
If we do get an email, we'll give it to you, but that would, just so you would be aware of it, but we're not treating it as public comment. If people want to come and make public comment, that's how we're taking it.
was that, just sorry for a quick sidebar, was that something that arose during COVID?
It arose,
Okay.
it came about in COVID. We did the box out front, all of those things we did, but we've gone pretty much now gone back to, if you're in person, we'll take your public comment. If you want to share an email, we'll do what we did before. We just give it to the board, make them aware of it, but it's not treated as public comment.
Great.
For the record.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that update, sir. All right, then, moving on to item 6 and consider approving the minutes from the previous meeting on August 3rd. Anybody have any revisions, or do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Seconded by, I'll second. And all in favor of approving minutes? Aye. Ayes have it. No opposed. And it's approved. Okay, moving on to new business. Number 7.1, updates and possible actions regarding past and future trail walks. Terry, Don Guanella Delco Hike with the Connect Edgemont, if you can give us an update from how that went.
It was wonderful. We had both those organizations with us as well as the organization called SEPA. It's Southeastern Pennsylvania Adventures. It's a Facebook page and it has 1,000 members. And so somehow by sharing this on different media, those guys picked it up and they came. There were about a dozen of those folks. So we had 35. It was very successful. It was led by Doug Humes. Also, Cindy Mahala was there, who's with the EAC. She did a lot of commentary about the water. There's creeks in there and so forth. And they had us all back for a reception at the Thomas Mass. I've never been a mile from the Don Guanella place. By the way, they're trying to get that name changed. So they're thinking, what do you call it? A whetstone, the whetstone rail. There used to be a factory there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It had a wheel for the power and manufactured with stones. At the time, I think it was the biggest in the country.
Wow.
So we had that one, and then the future ones. They just talk about other walks.
Yeah, I mean, the big one with the bike thing is unfortunately it is canceled for this weekend. I was talking with James Bergman of Bike Delco Coalition. And in full transparency, it may have mostly been my fault because I missed a meeting with the Board of Supervisors on Monday, the 14th, where they had a time slot for us. And it all had to do with requesting the police support because we are crossing, or we were planning on crossing Westchester Pike a couple of times and 252 a couple of times. So we had put in a form and a request with the plan. And then they had it, but then all that got was then the slot for the meeting to which the Board of Supervisors ultimately had to approve it because they're approving township resources to be able to do it. And in full transparency, I missed the meeting and completely blanked on the date and didn't realize until after. So I apologize to everybody because I think
You had a
everybody
pretty good
knows how
reason
hard
for
I
it,
was.
right?
It doesn't matter. I messed up. I think everybody knows how much I wanted that to do because I was the one that brought it. So I'm beating myself up over the whole thing, obviously, but the Bike Delco Coalition kind of understood and they said, listen, we got more time now. We can plan something for the spring with a lot more time to actually execute and plan it. We can make it better. We can get more support for it, have more time to promote it as well, to hopefully get more numbers. So the scale of it could change, but at least we have more time now to plan it correctly. And so they're still on board with helping us out. We're very understanding the situation. I'm personally just very frustrated because that, one linchpin fell out and it was me and it all kind of fell apart. So apologize to everybody because I was really looking forward to it. And I know that we had talked about it, Terry, with some families that we had met at the farmer's market. So just,
It's okay.
I am frustrated.
No.
Yeah. So anyways, that's the update on that, which covers this one. And then obviously the media post, there was something on that as well. So just take that out. But yeah. The next one then we have on the list is the Garrett Williamson walk. This is the walk with the dock, which is coming up very soon.
I'll have to post that on the government page. That, so I'll put that up probably this weekend along with the Garrett Williamson Harvest Festival. But that we'll have 4 walks actually. Beth, I think, doing some of them, right?
Yeah, and I just want to correct the date. It's the 14th, not the 11th.
Yeah, it's the 14th. Oh, yeah, that's not right.
The walk with the dock,
So,
The Harvest Festival.
14th of October.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it's me and Alex, last I heard, in the walks.
and me,
Oh, you took? Okay.
Oh, yeah. And probably no ones. But the next one is Walk with a Dog, which the reason I didn't actually get that up is because I'm looking for this registration thing that they have, and it has been live. So Giselle sent me some data today about that and the Harvest Festival. Have to register for the Harvest Festival and buy a ticket if you want now for $20 for your car to park there, but then you can do everything, all the walks for free and so forth, but it's a fundraising event, so you can't just go on that walk for free. So I'll make sure I put that up there. And then I would like to add one, please, on November 11th. We're going to do a walk with Willistown Conservation Trust, either at the Ashbridge Preserve or at call it Jimmy Land. What's it called?
Okay, okay.
No, Kirkwood Preserve. Yeah. That's in there. And so we connected with a tremendous person from the WPC team who's enthusiastic and actually taking pictures.
Give a time or no?
Probably it's going to be morning. I did want to mention that at the Don Guanella, I sent an email around because Connect Edgemont passes out a waiver at every one of the walks that they're involved with, and everybody has to sign. Folks sue us. They're not actually a township group, I don't think, so maybe that's why they have, we don't have to do that, right?
They don't have the protection of the,
They don't have the protection that we would have. I mean, I think it probably wouldn't hurt if we started doing that, particularly. My concern has not been until recently. We've always been doing the walks in the township. You're now doing walks outside of the township. And so we don't control the trails. We don't control any of those things. And so we probably ought to do that if we're going to do that. So.
so maybe we can use.
But
some of the
I'm gonna
language.
work with, I have what you sent over. And I'm gonna work with our solicitor trying to get that done.
The good thing about that is that she recognizes we've already filled one out on a prior walk, she doesn't have to do it again, so it's just a blanket for anyone. If she has a mailing list that she's developed based on that, you know, all very efficient.
It is a well-drafted document.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a quick look over. I thought it was a good document. I thought it would work even for us. I don't know that it takes away our liability for a township, but you know, it's,
Yeah,
it at least,
it helps.
it helps.
I will say that, they look at it and some of them actually read it.
Yeah.
before they sign. Good. And we have had people on these walks that, you know, I'm a sweeper, I'm at the end, so they, the guy's not in great shape, so. But this is part of understanding and the way you write the document.
Yeah.
You need to know that you're gonna cross the creeks and you're gonna have a steep hill. It'd be steep. You made it, so. everybody made it. Yeah.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you very much. All right, so on to then 7.2, so discussion possible action on social media. Talked about the first bullet there, which is the bike ride, which is unfortunately going to be canceled now. The next one we have then is the new post every month for the new member. Being that it was an initiative that I brought up last month, I've taken the first one, so I've kind of crafted something that I gotta send to everybody. I kind of finished it last week and I forgot to email it to everybody, but basically the one thing that I was looking at was this is a kind of interesting time of year. We are coming into a lot of different bird species that are migrating in and moving out, and raptors especially, but different stuff like that. And it got me thinking. I was listening to a podcast with Cornell, I think it was Cornell University.
Yeah.
Ornithology lab.
Yeah, so they created what's called the Merlin Bird ID app, and it's free, 100% free. There's no hidden charges, no buy with ever in. And it's really cool. We can literally use the microphone in your phone. So what I wanted to do is try and with public engagement of getting people into our parks, and when they're out, if they have this completely free ID that's, you know, was essentially created from taxpayer dollars anyways, that was grants funded to university of how they created, which is great. But it's a great resource. It's something that can help people engage in the green spaces in nature and on walking around the township. And I thought it was a pretty cool opportunity with September being the start of when a lot of birders get very active going out and trying to find them. And it allows you to kind of find more. So I came up with a very quick 3 sentences on it, and then just really including the link to, or the, not the link, but the ID for Apple and Android to be able to go on and click on it to be able to download it. And again, it's a free app. It's extremely accurate, like surprisingly, it'll pick up turkeys, which is really cool when they're gobbling in the spring.
I've picked up turkeys on that.
Yeah,
I use it all the time. In fact, I recommended it
go.
at the bird walk at Garrett Williamson last year.
there you go. So I'm already late to the game. John, you stole my thunder, sorry.
So it's a microphone, so it records the bird's call.
Yes.
It'll actually translate it to, this is that bird. So if you hear a bunch of birds chirp in your backyard, put it on and it'll tell you the different species
Yeah.
of birds that are making that bird.
That's really cool, because they must have one that's visual with your camera.
Yeah, it's an icon that
That's
appears
different.
on your phone that shows what the bird is. And you can actually press on the icon and could go back in that series. Exactly where that bird call occurred. You can go back and hear it again. Also, you press another button and you can get a history of that particular bird species.
Yeah, and then there's a whole separate app that the same ornithology lab has that is what birders use to actually go and actually record when they've heard, you know, a certain bird or seen a certain species and they record it and the lab uses that in their
eBird.
overall research.
Mhm.
That's called eBird, correct?
Yeah.
So they're two separate apps, but this is more for the novice that's trying to get into it. And as far as like the amount of people walking on the trails, I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of highlight a very good resource
Good idea.
that can get people enjoying the outdoors even more. So that was my kind of contribution. I
Did you
will,
post it already?
I did not post it. No, we don't post anything. I send it. So I have to send it to Steve Bradley, but I didn't want to send it until I talked with everybody about that as being the one, because last month we talked about
Yeah.
what the month of September was and all that kind of stuff. But I thought this was just a great opportunity and
What's the
clearly.
name of the app?
Clearly, some of our, it's called Merlin
Merlin.
Bird ID. And then the other
It's
one
also
is
good for people that are hard of hearing like me. I'm an avid birder, but a lot of stuff I don't hear without Merlin. So it's wonderful.
For a visual, it might be nice to kind of show like what that screen looks like, kind of like, hey, these are all the critters that, you know. we're
No, that's a
chirping,
good
like,
point, yeah.
This is from
Screenshot.
my backyard, so like. All the things that.
screenshot and text, and I'll use it because I haven't identified that many yet. But anyway, so that was mine for the first of this new initiative where every month a committee member, it's a cycle will come up with the township, you know, the post for it so that we can put that on there. And I thought that was a great one. So
Do we have a process written down for submitting a?
really lately, it's just been
Post to
write
the
one
township?
up, discuss it, and then send it to
Give it to
Steve.
Steve,
Is the time,
okay.
yeah, correct. That's been the procedure. I don't know. I know we've had some issues with them making it onto the actually getting posted, but I don't know that process. I don't know who's in charge of the actual social media account.
So there will be a change to that. I just don't know the exact change, and it will probably come out within the next week. Steve is going to actually be leaving the township, so.
I didn't know if you wanted to stay.
Yeah, I'm okay saying it at this point. But I don't have exactly who's going to take his place for that purpose.
Yeah.
I think I know who's going to do it. I just haven't confirmed everything. So, but that'll go out to all the committees next week. We have a committee meeting next week and I'll handle all that at that time.
Well,
Thursday.
somewhat related, sir, where we talk about the procedural stuff. When is the next group meeting with all the committee chairs and vice chairs?
Next week,
That's the one next week?
Thursday.
Okay, Thursday, okay, good.
that announcement will be going out
That is that.
probably tomorrow. Or a reminder, I should say.
One thing for future write-ups. Beth, you said you had a list of,
Yeah, did I not? I know I emailed it to you
Holidays.
initially, but did I not email it to you again?
yeah, you could do that again. I think somebody signed me up for October, so I'll do
Yeah.
it.
But I can get you an electronic copy of that.
Okay.
Unless you want to take that one, because I mean, I obviously have it on my computer, so.
Yeah, well, I can look at it here and check
Ignore
out.
me. If there's any.
Watch your mic, John. Yeah. All right, so I guess John's gonna do October, which is good, so I will email the post, Steve, to you for right now, I guess. And then forward it on. to
For this
whoever-
week, yes, please.
Sounds good. So, John, you'll take the next one, so next meeting, you know, you can tell us what you came up with, what you like, and then we'll discuss feedback and then get in the right hands at that point after the new
Okay.
person has been
Have
assigned.
you already done yours?
I've written it, yeah, so I just wanted to present it to everybody today
Okay.
before it actually
Great.
ended up in the township's hands.
Yeah.
Okay. And then again, so now the new initiatives every month, and we'll cycle through and somebody comes up with some, and maybe you have a month that you're especially passionate about something that's going on that you think is related to our mission. Whether that be Joe and hunting season and the deer or nope, and then, or it's just anything else, different stuff around the holidays, whatever you think would be helpful, appreciate it.
One of those things in October is Raptor Month, so I think I'll take that one.
There you go. Oh, on the bird theme, you could double down on the bird theme, because then they could keep even
Yep.
going deeper on that.
Yep.
All right, I won't touch on the raptors. And when I mention this, I'll just talk about birds in the backyards in general and introduce people to the
Yeah.
resource. That works.
I was down at Cape May and saw a swallowtail kite this weekend, which is very rare. So that might appear in my article.
Okay, I'm just gonna jump in here because it's photographer appreciation. in October. Photography. Can we do two?
Yeah, I mean, there's no
I
reason
have,
why
like-
not. Absolutely.
What?
Yeah.
You can always do more than one.
Okay, because I have a ton of pictures of critters from Newtown Square and plants and all that fun stuff. And the natural stuff we have to offer in our township.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We'd always do more. I mean, it's better. October, November, like I love the fall, so I'm excited about it too. Yes. Okay, any other comments, questions on the social media post that we're planning? No, I didn't know if we had anything, honestly. You're talking about from the previous newsletter, not the one that Steve, you were emailing about. Yeah.
Which is like,
You were talking about the last one.
yeah, this.
Don't know
It's
either.
the top.
So, Mr. Neese, with the emails, we were talking about the upcoming deadline. Terry had asked among a few of us in the group of, I guess, a previous article that she had written for it, like had it sent in and never made it in, and we didn't know what happened, didn't know why. So I don't know either. I can't remember and have to go back and see if the copies.
I'll have to look back to see what happened, but it should have gotten in, and if it's still applicable, we could use it this time. I don't know if it was still applicable.
It has the bike.
I was
route.
gonna
So
say,
you
yeah.
don't want that.
Yeah,
But, by end of day tomorrow. can I get- One morning, excellent, cool.
Yeah, by the time I'd sent an agenda, I didn't know that we had that issue. So I didn't end up making it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, no new items on new business then, on the old business.
I got one quick
Oh, sorry,
question,
go ahead.
and maybe something we can discuss later. I was out in Colorado at the beginning of the month. And we did a lot of large bike rides, like we used e-bikes. So naturally, I liked an e-bike, so I ended up buying an e-bike and I got an e-bike and it's fantastic. The question is, it's very difficult to understand specifically what the restrictions are on different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3 e-bikes. Do we have any restrictions on e-bikes on any of the paths?
What do you mean restrictions? You meaning
There's
where
restriction.
they can be used on the road,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff?
No, the road's fine. Like, for instance, level 1 is a pedal assist, strictly a pedal assist bike that goes up to a specific miles per hour,
Mhm.
typically. I mean, they're all around the same. Level 2 is anything that's pedal assist or throttle up to, I believe, 28 miles per hour. And then level 3 is anything above 28 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of places, especially Colorado, because I've been using them for years. There's certain restrictions. They can do a level 1 or level 2 as long as level 2, the throttle is turned off. Or it's tuned down to 17 miles per hour. I don't know if that's an issue. One of the reasons why I'm bringing it up is because I was going to drive it here or somewhere else. But I don't know if I go on Listener's Path, if there's restrictions there. There's restrictions on other paths that we have. And it's something we should probably talk about because as our paths grow, there should be restrictions because people are going to get really upset when they have a 25-mile-an-hour bike fly by them.
I actually,
relatively narrow path.
Yeah, exactly.
it's actually a complete coincidence, but I was researching e-bikes earlier today, the Silent Cat. I don't know if it's- Yeah. Is it Quiet Cat? Yeah. I was researching that and they have all their models now because of all the different state
You
regulations.
can modify it.
You can literally modify it on the electronic in the software that limits it for where you're at. So that way you're always in compliance, which was kind of a cool feature.
I can tell you the bike that I ended up getting, which is, I did a lot of research on.
I'm sure you did. But yeah, just complete coincidence. But it's a good point. I mean, related to the bike stuff. I mean, being an avid, just regular cyclist for how many years? I mean, people hate when the cyclist says on your left, And meanwhile, you just don't want them to not know you're coming and hit them, but then it's like, anyone, usually the pedestrians and the cyclists, everybody hates the cyclists, pedestrians hate them, the cars hate them. So, yeah, it's definitely important to bring up. I
That's a good
guess,
point though, because Lister's private property, but I saw an e-bike on the Goshen Trail when I was walking the other day, and I was thinking about that. This kid was going very responsibly, but it's not a bad idea for us to have some parameters around.
So what's interesting, the rail to trail, the Great Valley Trail, based on, theirs is ambiguous. And theoretically, I've heard a lot of people that take e-bikes there, but if you read it, it specifically says, unless you have a handicap wheelchair, you can't have a powered bike. But I
yeah,
mean, I don't know if anybody's, but if you go to a national park,
We have a,
yeah,
we allow e-bikes, we rent them, they rent them. And it has, there's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit on the trails.
yeah.
So but originally the National Park Service passed it where it was allowed in any national park. I think now it's been moved to where the superintendents can make that determination. And I know Valley Forge is struggling a little bit and trying to figure out how to do that safely, because they have issues with cyclists and in general.
well, it's gonna be one of those things, kind of like drones. It's a technological advance because motorized bikes for many years ago were the mopeds, like when I was a kid and stuff like that, and everybody probably remembers. And they were banned in a lot of spots. Then you had the e-scooters, the bird scooters and other things that started taking over cities. And for a while, it was this great thing. And then they started cracking down on that because of, honestly, drunk people using them in most of the inner cities and where it was really bad. So I'm thinking e-bikes are probably the same thing. They're only going to become more popular. REI is pushing them hardcore, and there's something that's coming up for the federal government where they're trying to vote on a tax credit, like a rebate credit of some kind, or tax credit. If you buy a bike, that it would be federally backed somehow. The reason why is they're trying to get people to not drive cars, and the average person not having the ability to deal with the traffic in certain areas because of the speed and their own physical, limitations on a regular pedal bicycle. So that's what they're pushing. But ultimately, it's going to be a big thing, and the laws will probably catch up over time. So it is a good discussion point of, as we're promoting bike paths in some of these parts on our maps. And then obviously, like you said, like the Lister Trail is a whole nother thing. We have our trails on like the Goshen Trail and whatnot. And it's a good point. So the real question is, are there any overarching state laws that already exist in Pennsylvania? Because you're saying Colorado. So Colorado had laws?
No, it's based on borough to borough, or
It's
whatever,
based- okay.
whatever the municipalities are. Breckenridge had one, and then Frisco has one.
Okay.
Obviously, since the bike pass, I mean, we did 26 miles. They did 26 miles between Breckenridge down to Dillon and Frisco and back. Those bike pass, they're gonna have the same rules.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that they have guidelines that they go by. I mean, I think an e-bike's great. I mean, for a person like me, it's in the 45 to get back into biking. It's been wonderful. I mean, it provides that additional, I mean, instead of going 2 miles down the road, I can push to 12, 15 or whatever you want. And you can still get exercise out of it. You don't have to do completely throttle. In fact, it actually works better if you do pedal assist. But be able to take in an hour and a half to 2 hours riding a bike is better than, because I'm out of shape, I can only do 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So you're going to see a lot more people using them.
I already have,
So based on what you're saying, I would make a recommendation that you put it on your next agenda.
Yep.
And that you come up with what you think the regulation should be. And because you should make a recommendation to the board. I mean, this is the committee that should do that. And whatever you think is the right one, and you may pick different based on where it is, in the township. Remember that the Lister Trail will become a public trail, probably within the next, I would think, 3 months, maybe the next 6 months, but it's going to be given to the township. And so they're supposedly finishing all of the work on that. And so it would be the Lister Trail, the Goshen Trail, the trails that we already have in place. And then, I would make it broad enough that, maybe you have a different rule for paved trails versus stone trails, maybe not, maybe you make it the same, but whatever it is, make it broad enough that it doesn't matter. And then whatever it's a township trail, it applies, if that makes sense.
Is there already rules in place on the township trails or property on regular bicycle action?
Well, we do have rules like it, not that anybody follows it, but like here in Gable Park, we have that you can't ride a bike on the artificial turf. But I see little kids out there learning how to ride the bike on artificial turf, and we'll ask them not to, but it's, you know, I mean, it's hard to run off everybody that does it, but that's the one thing, because it does tear up the turf.
Well, I was thinking more along the line.
Yeah,
So like, I don't know if Meadow Preserve, there's, you know, if they're trying to preserve certain areas, like if there's like, I don't know what species of grasses are and stuff. like
Let's
that.
just stay on trail though,
Yeah.
right? Is most things. It's like
I
regardless if
don't-
you're
I don't know.
walking
I
or
mean,
on a
but those are the
bike.
things that as an e-bike, I want to know so that I don't violate it and get embarrassed by getting in trouble or
yeah,
making people upset. It's not a matter of like being, you know, restricted and policing. It's more of education so that people
Yeah.
are aware of exactly what they can do and what they can't do.
And that is what I was gonna ask. I know some parks, they have restrictions on things like this, but they don't have any enforcement. So then they're just making laws that people are getting used to ignoring. You know, I think, yes, we should have some restrictions and whatnot, but is there gonna be any teeth behind it? Any follow-up, is there anyone there actually going to be enforcing this?
well, I mean,
Um,
what I think that as we continue to expand our trail system, right? I mean, as we add the Listener Trail and that, and they now then would connect to the Meadow Preserve, we've also had the trail that goes through Equus, and, you know, so we're getting more and more, and we'll have more and more really in a relatively short period of time as those pieces get added. The thing that I would make note of is that, you know, I've been talking with our chief about how are we going to enforce? How are we going to not even just enforce, it's more of an issue of how are we going to make sure that people always feel safe on our trails? So I'm already talking to him about some options. We may go to having every shift have one officer who has a bike. And-
Remember I asked that at the
Yeah.
one meeting, I said, do we already have a bicycle?
Yeah.
track?
And we don't yet, but I mean, it's something that I think we're gonna have to think about. And, you know, and it may be, do they need to have the ability to have an electric bike, you know, just keep up with somebody, you know, I mean, it's like.
Keep up with Joe and his souped
I
up-
mean, it's, you know, because all that's changing, you know, I mean, when I started having these conversations in Phoenixville before I left, we were discussing just a pedaled bike because e-bikes weren't really the big thing, you know, 8 years ago, right? And now, you know, it's constant. And so it's very prevalent, more and more, you know, people are buying them all the time and it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger concern here is, I mean, I did amp mine up to like 30 some miles an hour, but obviously I can push that down. But what I'm seeing more often, especially like down the shore and stuff, is younger kids, it becoming, I wouldn't say it's cost, you know, it's like, it's still cost prohibitive to buy an e-bike. They're
Yeah,
pretty
they're like,
expensive.
the cheapest ones are like still over $2
But
grand.
some of
brand
them are
new.
like almost dirt bikes now. So
Yeah.
you have a
Yeah.
pack of 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids.
We
Not all-
definitely don't
not
want them in the
almost.
Meadow Preserve.
Not almost, they actually have.
Oh,
like,
I know. Yeah.
knobby tired dirt bike ones, yeah.
And they're heavier than regular bikes, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think my
Yeah, you
bike's
can
Looks like
clear out
70
grass
pounds.
and
Right.
grass,
So
and
it
it
has
should be
a-
paved surfaces. I have a lot of.
It does
opinions.
have a larger.
Yeah, but I think-
I have a lot of opinions.
And that's why I think it's best that it should come from this group. I mean, this is something that you may want to have it on the agenda next meeting and create a subcommittee that would do the research, come back and report back what, you know, what are some of the options and what it would look like. And so, but I think that's something you want to consider.
Yeah, and even though it might be difficult to enforce, it's always a good idea to have rules in the event of an accident.
Well, that's what I was
This'll
gonna,
reduce liability for the township.
that's what I was gonna say is like, all the cycling I've done over the years and a lot of, when I'm doing a lot of downhill mountain biking, that you're sharing a mountain and sharing trails with pedestrians. I've had, unfortunately, friends that they got an accident. Somebody on the trails got their headphones on, they're not paying attention, they cut across, he's like yelling, but they didn't hear him. And then what ended up happening was it was all in the rules that were established on that, in that park. And what they said, and that ended up in the legal battle afterwards. So yeah, a lot of times there are rules that are ignored. But when then something happens, there is some teeth to it that can help lay stuff out and, you know, it does come into play.
And when we do eventually put a rule in place, we're gonna need to post that signage at the entrance to all of these
Yeah.
trails.
Oh, it's very important. You know, you
It's
gotta have
critical.
it at all the entrances to the trail and those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
We need
good
to
point.
start with finding documentation that the township might have on where bikes are allowed on trails now.
I think right now we don't have any restrictions, but I think we can, you know, again, that's why I'm suggesting
Okay.
to put it on your agenda next meeting, potentially create a subcommittee to go in, I mean, because there's a lot to look at. You know, I don't know that you can sit here and have a conversation and get it all knocked out as a group.
No.
But if you had a subcommittee of 3, you could probably knock it out, you know, over a 30-day period of doing some research and getting what you need to do.
Especially because of the crossover of actually entering the roadways, because the right now, the actual bike paths that we have on our network plan are on 252 and Westchester Pike, where we're talking about putting them on the shoulders and stuff. So there's like a whole nother legal component probably to it that makes it more complicated, and that's why probably the different trails have different restrictions or different uses and all that, and it makes sense.
I think a lot of it comes down to safety.
Yeah.
So when you're upping the speed from 8 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour, there's a big difference in, you know, if you were to hit a pedestrian or cross a street. And I mean, I could tell you, I had it this week and I almost got run over about 3 times because they look so always on a bike, thought that they could just pull out and they shoot like right into them. So if you're not paying attention, I mean, I ride motorcycles too, so I'm usually always looking for that type of thing happen.
You just didn't put pedals on the motorcycle?
What's
You
that?
just didn't add pedals to the motorcycle?
No,
You had to get
motorcycle's
another
like 1,000 or 1,000 cc, so, yeah, I mean, I just think it'd be a good idea for us to look into it.
vehicle. It is.
I think it's a great idea, and I think this is the right place to do it.
Could you also include other alternative electronic motorized things
Yeah,
like e-scooters?
I would
and-
make it I would look at it very broadly. That's why I'm saying I think
Yeah,
it's not something you'll probably knock out in a
Yeah.
meeting
I mean,
as
I
part
can
of
tell
your
you,
agenda. I
based
think
on my own research, it's either a pedal bike, okay? An e-bike that has pedals, it has to have pedals. And then they'll have, under ADA, they'll have certain vehicles, whatever they may be called, they could be electric wheelchairs, they could be electric scooters, to allow people to access and still use that trail, but everything else is out. Any
I
gas
saw-
powered,
a golf cart
yeah, well,
on Goshen Road.
that's ridiculous.
Is it the one with the pink stuff on the side?
No, it's green, green
Okay.
golf, guy in a green golf cart.
was that on our trail or was that?
No, it's on Goshen Road.
On the
Drives
road.
up Goshen
That's a
Road.
whole different issue.
That's a
but-
whole nother issue. I
Yeah.
thought you were talking about on the trail.
And I would make sure whatever policy, like if we're setting speed limits, if we're saying your e-bike can't go this fast, then that should be the same for regular bikes. You know, you get some people, like if we're going down to,
I don't know how to do that.
No,
I mean,
you,
well,
you
but
do and you
it-
don't, but
you could say like this level, but if we're saying, you know, you can only go so fast on these trails, then it becomes.
it's not that. What it is the way that the way, because I was looking at it earlier,
I
the
know.
way it was written was on like
How much?
under power, but then
Right.
obviously if you're going downhill, it's a completely different situation when you're not under power. I mean, I hit over 40 miles an hour on Umbria Street in Manayunk because of how steep and open that is. And I do it at 6 in the morning and there's no cars and you
You
just.
better have good brakes.
I do.
Okay.
But yeah, but that's a regular bicycle. And like with the weight of an electric vehicle behind it, you probably could get.
All right,
Okay,
so putting it
all
on the
right.
agenda for next month.
So we're-
posting
yeah.
recommendation to the board of supervisors after discussion.
Yeah, so we'll jump ahead to items for next agenda, but that's definitely an important one. And Joe, if in the meantime, just because of your recent research, maybe you and I could talk and we could see if you've already found certain rules and stuff that other people do.
I would also look at like the circuit trails and Ridley Creek State Park, obviously Valley Forge, French Creek, like local areas, what their rules are. and
Yeah,
stuff.
it turns out that the state and national parks are much more relaxed on this because I think the paths and the amount of room they have to separate people.
It's because they don't know. They're
Oh.
still figuring it out.
But I know the local pass, just because of the size restrictions of the pass, they want to limit the speed. And that's really primarily that. And I don't know if it's a matter of like, okay, you have the capability of going that fast. It's more of the bike should be toned down to meet the criteria, they're level 1 or level 2.
Well, it's just like speed limits on roadways is you have, if the road surface is windy and narrow, they lower the speed limit. If there's blind corners, they lower the speed limit. And when it's highways, you get faster. So it makes sense from that perspective. The Bike Delco Coalition might already actually have something on this that can help because they do this. Obviously, this is a local county chapter, but it's a national thing that they're connected to. So they might actually even be able to help with that and be a part of the conversation, give us some literature, not literature, but existing legislation or something like that, which would be good. So, yeah, it's a great idea. Glad you brought it up. Thank you. Okay, so new business / items for next agenda. So we'll have e-bike discussions and potentially create a subcommittee and go down that path. Thank you, Joe. And then now moving on to old business, which was kind of all connected with that. Sorry, budget requests. And so Steve, I kept going over, I couldn't find anything more than the 600 that we already talked about, which was the initiation fee or the fee for the account, unless we add in a electric e-bike for all of us is a nice in the budget request, but probably not, but can't
That was a
blame-
good idea, but it's probably not.
can't blame me for trying. Start with 2. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Beth. But that was all we ended up
Just-
coming up to. So
Just get that
the
turned
form.
in.
Yep. So I don't know if anybody else since our last meeting has thought of anything else, but I tried, I kept looking and there's just nothing that's concrete enough now where it can come together with a good estimate. Unless we had something from like the sign making companies, but we kind of talked about how small and price. George Sharrett's 2 meetings ago had told us like he's got that kind of stuff covered for right now. So no issue there.
And I'll make sure that he continues to cover that for next year.
Okay, so anybody else have anything else that they've thought of since the last meeting in which they'd like to include? Speak now for however hold your peace, because I have to get that in pretty much like tomorrow. Okay, thank you. Moving on, 8.2. The monthly review of the Greenways and Open Space Network Plan. So this was another initiative, obviously, that I brought up at the start of the year. Is just trying to help refresh everybody. Where every township meeting or every meeting now that we have every month, we'll go through a section of the open network plan that is supposed to be kind of like our homing beacon, what we kind of stick to and what we're going on. This week would be becoming of the bigger picture, which is it's very kind of loose and generic. Last month, we talked about the land allocation and basically how the land in the township was used. That kind of bled over into the zoning stuff. So I'm kind of skipping over that because I mean, unless some more educated people than I on the zoning stuff can help me understand how that would really affect our committee. We could talk about that with, a couple of lawyers in here that probably are a lot more educated, but I don't know, sir, if there's anything in the zoning that currently that truly affects us, or if we would ever be looking to rezone stuff that would help this committee regarding preserving a green space. There wasn't like a whole, that wasn't as in-depth of a topic that this
Yeah.
report went into.
Yeah, so I think there are some things zoning related that could come into play for you all in green space. But I'm not sure at this point that I'm prepared to like walk you through the detail of all of that. But what I would say is this, that zoning determines a lot of how we're going to look in the future. I mean, that's really a lot of what zoning does, right? Land development helps with that, but zoning says like what the size of a sign can be, or what the space between the stream and buildings can be. And so like zoning gets into a lot of those kind of things. And so I always say that if you have good zoning, the zoning should set the direction of what you want your community to look like 50 years from now. Because we're functioning on zoning that was written 30 plus years ago. And so some people say, I don't like what township looks like today. I say, well, that decision was made 30 years ago and we didn't change anything to make it look different. And so that's why it looks the way it does today. And so if you want something different, you have to put it into the zoning to make it look different. So if you wanted green space, if green space is something that you're thinking about, and you were to say, for example, on all trails that you have, you want 5 feet of green space on either side. That, you know, like, I mean, that's an example of something that you might look at. Or you might say, in a little different, is that any development, if we get into start looking at the proposed development and the growth, they must include as part of the zoning a space of X set aside of green space and what that looks like. And so there's some things that you can do. Some of it goes into land development, some of it goes into zone.
Yeah, but the bigger concern with that is typically your fee in lieu of.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this, I'm sure this township has a fee in lieu of. So as a result, they're required based off certain acreage of compiling certain amount of green space or allocating certain amount of green space. Now, most people know within that industry, and I'm sure you know this, you can buy a fire truck, you can pay a fee in lieu of, and then you don't have to have a green space.
Yeah, Yeah.
My feeling is any of that, I would think that unless something's zoned for development or business or whatever, it's probably gonna be green space or like for residential, and so therefore, they're the ones gonna have to ask for a variance,
Mhm.
not us ask the opposite.
the development,
Correct.
a variance, but to something, do we have,
Well, the variance.
do
just
we
means
already
that-
have the law or the ordinance in place that would, or do we need to suggest that language be
Well, it
included
depends.
in it based on your comment of, we're working off of zoning from 30 years ago? And obviously, the whole reason this committee, well, not the entire reason, but a lot of the reason it was created was because of frustrations from the township and people, from the residents on the connectivity and the overdevelopment. So if we combine that with, then that sounds like an initiative that this group would at least take over, is to make recommendations to the board to make changes to our existing zone. Am I off
At the
base?
very
I don't
minimum,
know.
we need to find out what is in place now.
So you would
In
have to,
terms of what's written about what are the requirements for green space.
you would have to overlay.
I haven't seen that.
The zoning map with like the master plan or something like that. To find out if anything that is currently that we identify as green space, what is the zoning on that? Is that mixed use? Is it residential? Is it commercial? Whatever it may be. And then from that, it's already laid out. I can't imagine there's a piece of property that doesn't have a zone. Specifically zoned, right?
Every piece
Yeah.
of property in the
Yeah.
township is zoned as something, if that's what you're asking.
The overlay is important because that's one of the hardest things of reading this document is the tons of different maps and trying to translate from one to the other. And then, like I said, there's a ton of properties that were never identified, even though they're clearly open green spaces of large size parcels, were never even identified in it. And then some of the ones that were have already been sold off, developed. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm just now learning a little bit more of. I have a rather cynical view of it just because of, you always hear of the ability to people to rezone stuff for development for what they want, but then you never hear of it the opposite side. And again, completely anecdotal, I might be completely off base, I don't know. I'm just only hearing one negative side of it. I don't know if that's actually, if the data would suggest that that's the majority of the direction it goes.
Yeah, like, I mean, an example would either be like setbacks or like some type of like fixture. So if you put a shed, I know we have restrictions. I think you can only have one shed on your property. Now you can go petition and ask for a zoning variance and ask if you have 2 sheds.
Correct.
And they'll get, publicly, people either have complaints with it or whatever, and they can create a variance to that zoning. My point here is I think if we overlay the map based off the master plan or whatever we're looking at, like places to maintain green space, I would assume that they're probably residential or prohibition against development. I just don't know that. And that's what we got to find out.
Well, then, good, I'm glad I didn't skip over zoning then, because it at least provides good discussion and to get everybody thinking.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I would add is that, if you look around, there's not a whole lot of spaces left today.
Okay.
And, you can, the way to address some of it is to work through and go to property owners today and have agreements with them potentially that the township would have right of first refusal. You can do that through, I know John's talked about the official map. There's some other ways to do that as well. And so you can have
On a
agreements
case by case basis.
on a case by
versus
case basis, or trying to do a specific area or trying to accomplish a specific goal. If you have an area that you want to target, you know, some of what's out there today, I can already tell you, I've had some conversations with a couple of the developers. They're not interested.
Yeah.
And so you'd have to do it a whole different way, if you're going to try to achieve that.
Understood.
And if you make it too restrictive, there is that potential that you would, I mean, if they took you to
Fail.
court, huh?
Oh. sorry.
No, I was gonna say, if they take you to court, you could have some issues. Like it's not as, you can't necessarily go in and tell somebody who
Yeah.
has 200 acres, you can't develop this 200 acres. You know, there's laws and there's rights that they have as a property owner. But
You can
there
sue
are
you
some
for
things you
taking-
can do.
So, I mean, it's my understanding that that's how a lot of the in lieu of stuff has come about, like in my business where we have mitigation where if they want to build into the river, you're taking up essentially habitat. They have to then offset that by paying into for a mitigation site where you have public access and where that actually create more wetlands and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
that's something in my business, but it was my understanding that the beginning of those type of agreements was to provide an alternative to eliminate as much of risk as possible of those lawsuits coming back, is you have to have a fair and equal agreement where there's another alternative to be able to match that out. There's got to be some sort of a balancing effect.
Typically, what it's a quid pro quo. So typically, if you have a developer and say they have 200 acres, they're not going to just build one house for 1 acre, like it was one residential property, you want to subdivide it. So when you subdivide it, you got a petition to subdivide it, and then part of that, there's a fee in lieu of if you keep, or I'm sorry, there's a, you know, they have to keep a certain percentage of space as green. Then the township sometimes will say, hey, you want to pay a fee in lieu of, instead of putting a park in between that development, pay a fee in lieu of. And that's what they do. I don't know, I'm pretty certain that you have them here as well.
Yes.
We do have a fee in lieu of for recreation space.
Yeah.
And sometimes it depends on the size of the project, how we look at that.
Yeah, and then the other question that I would ask is, how is that calculation on the fee of really done? Because if you're talking about evaluating, it's very hard to evaluate the, you know, the actual land, like you probably getting this with the National Park Service all the time, where at the federal level, they're always talking about, they're trying to always justify with dollars the importance of having public lands, national park, when in reality, it's like, how do you put a value on that is
Intrinsic
difficult and intrinsic, yeah, it's got intrinsic value. So what they try to do is talk about the outdoor industry and the amount of money, that revenue, but that's not at our level, that's not what we'll be able to do. So how you evaluate it to calculate that fee, I feel like a lot of times.
There's a
it's
full
ripple.
thing that's in
Yeah.
our ordinance and our land development.
There is.
That if you're going
Okay.
to do the fee in lieu of, that there's a full calculation that's done. And it's consistent so that it's not like I charge this developer more than this developer just because I don't like the developer. It's
Yeah.
consistent across all projects. I'd
probably
have to
has
pull
to
it
be.
out.
Right,
Yeah,
to
exactly.
protect you guys from getting sued.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you said most of our zoning was done 30 years ago. Was that calculation also done 30 years ago?
I would have to look back. I don't know when. I think the calculation uses a current value of certain things. I know we do, like, we update it for one of the things that we have for like tree replacement. We've updated it every so often based on what it costs to plant a new tree. So those kind of things.
I think if you get to the point where you're worried about a fee in lieu of, you've already lost.
Yeah,
What I think you were trying to say is the whole idea is we want to put it in so we're not getting a fee in lieu of.
correct.
We want the green space. One of the things that, you know, that we tried to do, and we were not very successful, but we tried to actually rewrite the code so that for the land development side, so that it was an encouragement for a developer to do cluster. And very similar to what happened with Lissitor. I think, John, you were on the board when they did the Lissitor one.
We didn't have a cluster ordinance at that
yeah,
time. We were
Yeah,
flying by
but
the
we
seat
tried
of
to
our
actually
pants.
write one since then that would go down as low as 5 acres and go up and cover any larger acreage. And we ran into some challenges, it's one of those things that you have to have some incentive for the person to do it. And, I was really trying to do it for the Stony Knoll property. I really wanted to do a cluster there. But we never got the incentive to the level that made sense for him to do that. So he went, fortunately, he did very large lots and very few houses. It could have been a whole lot more than what he did. And so we ended up being okay, but but there wasn't like open green space that's left to the township, or there wasn't open green space that's left and preserved. It's all on individual property owners. And a lot of people like that. People have bought houses with 2 acres, 3 acre lots because that's what they want. And it does have a level of preserving open space but it's not the same as preserving open space that's shared. And there's a difference.
It's less population density, which is the one big draw, obviously, versus if they were built like condos or something.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but what you do is like, let's say that a property would take 30 homes. And so you might say you get an extra 5 homes if you preserve half of the land as open space, kind of thing. Like there's ways to do that incentivize it, but we also then, like, if it's in a certain area where we say that you have to have, let's say that it says you have to have at least an acre of land for each house, then you have to come back and be able to say, when you do cluster, we're not going to require an acre of land for each house. We do for the base, determining how many homes you could build, but then once you get done, we open that up and we say we're gonna bring it back to a much smaller. The landowner may have a very small amount of land. For example, I live in an HOA over here at Hunter's Run, and Hunter's Run is a perfect example of that. I own basically the footprint of my house plus 5 feet outside of it. I do not even own my own front yard. I mean, in my area, it's all HOA. It's communal. And so, but it's a very different type approach, but it's not open space. Like when I hear most of people talk about having open space within our community, they want open space that they can go and walk and play and do those kind of things. That's not what's there. And so it's a different thing.
I would make the argument, it's great if you have the communal space, but if you still have a landscaping company coming in and dumping fertilizer on it and pesticides and everything else, and even the individual landowner, you can't control what they're doing to their yard, it's still potentially polluting the streams and whatever else. And so like having zoning in place that will encourage more meadow and natural yards instead of having to have everything mowed would be another.
And I will say that the Environmental Advisory Commission is working on some of those things. And so they have 3 or 4 things that are focused on preserving or at least encouraging protection of our streams and things like that. I think we're talking about for you as a group, when we're looking at open space, I think the key is to look, how do we keep areas open? Like how do we keep them from becoming overdeveloped and those kind of things? And so that would be the key that where I would ask you to focus versus all the environmental impacts. We have a group that focuses on that.
One of our subcommittees has been working on it, and we're just about there to present. So I'll not today, but we'll talk about that probably in some upcoming meetings before the end. Time check?
Time check. It's
6:30. Doing good. All right. Okay, so thank you very much for everybody. I'm glad that that monthly review generated so much conversation regarding the zoning. Like I said, it's one thing that I'm just starting to learn about. I'm a bit dense on and trying to understand more and how it relates to our committee. So thank you for all the, good information and from those more experienced. Appreciate it. Okay. So next item is, I believe no, that's it. Public comment? Sorry, go ahead. Would you mind?
Come to the mic so it can be recorded.
And then for the record, state your name and your address in the township.
Sure. Evangelist Pappas, 124 Tyson Road. So I wanted to ask a couple questions about the trails plan, the master plan. You mentioned a couple of the some of the trail licensors being turned over to the township soon. Is there other progress being made, to advance that plan? Like the next, upcoming months or?
Yeah, so actually, I mean, and remember that the Trails and Greenways plan is kind of broad in its approach. Some of it's intended to be sidewalk and some of it's intended to be trail and some of it's, broad. So a couple of things have been done. You're going to start seeing a sidewalk put down Ellis Avenue here, right outside down here. And that's intended because there's actually another connection that's going to finish the from Uno Pizza up to the corner. And so again, it was starting to build this loop in that way. We've gone back out. We've put in for an additional grant to put the trail down Bishop Hollow Road, not Bishop Hollow Road, Campus Boulevard. Thank you, Campus Boulevard. So we're doing some of those things. We're in negotiations on a couple other trails right now, working through that process.
Those are the two grants that were on, I think, mentioned in the meeting minutes last time. There's a 300,000, was it 200,000 and a $3 million grant?
Yes, both
Yeah.
of those. Yeah, so we're actively seeking that. We've been putting back in each time for those. We've been now talking, again with our state rep, asking her to support those in that way. And that's where our target is. We're also going to re-engage the rail trail committee and look at that. That's the trail that would have gone from connecting basically Greer Park with Brookside Park.
Yeah.
So I kind of waited till the spring or till the fall because summer's not a great time to get everybody together, but
Sure.
we'll re-engage that group and move forward with that.
I mean, spending, $3 million, adding sidewalks and expanding these trails is great. And once, more of that happens, it'll be great. But I guess I understand it's a long process. Are there any opportunities to implement lower cost measures to start getting some of the network connected in a shorter time frame rather than waiting for multi-million-dollar grants to get the finished product done as the first thing? Is there an opportunity to do small, incremental or temporary measures that both get some of the implementation done quickly and also give you a chance to see what it'll be like, maybe, what it'll be like when it's done. And, while it's still temporary, you can actually get some feedback on it and maybe make it better or change it if that's appropriate.
Well, I mean, some of it's a matter of acquiring the land.
Okay.
Like, I mean, it's easy if we own the land. Yes, we could go do that today, but in most cases, the township doesn't own the land. We're having to acquire the land as part of the process. Like I said, I'm having.
That's in most cases, it's not.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I look down on it. There's very few places where I could say, oh, we could go put a trail here tomorrow, just have to go do it.
Yeah.
We could in a couple of our parks and, a couple of our parks, we're putting plans together to do that. And we have done that. There's a trail at Drexel Lodge that, was put in several years ago because we own the land. It was easy to do. Yeah, we're at the more difficult stage now where you have to go and you have to get a permission and you have to get an easement and you have to get things in place to go do it.
I assume that applies to the state streets that, you can't just slap a bike trail on the side of it without PennDOT approval and all that kind of stuff.
And even like we did when we repaved Campus Boulevard and we did Stony Brook and down on what does it change? Troop Farm Road. We did that as part of our project, when we did it. And, there we could because we own the roads. It was simple. But, yeah, the do state roads is much more involved and, PennDOT probably, depending on, unless they're ready to do that as part of their project, would say to us, you need to pay for all of that. And that gets pretty expensive.
Yeah, I just wanted to just get an idea of.
But I answered those questions. I don't know if anybody else has.
No, yeah, you did. I mean, to kind of like to the core of that one question, what would we say is our trail specific, not green spaces, do we think is our closest along the way? Is that one on Campus Boulevard you were discussing, or is it the conversations with SAP?
I think the conversation with SAP is going to be a little bit longer based on some things that are happening with them. They're still open, that's there. I'm needing to get an appraisal done, so I'm working on that.
That's at the end of the Goshen Trail that we're talking about is there's always been a hope of going down through SAP's property,
Yeah.
and the township has been having conversations with them. So that's why I was curious. We haven't brought it up in a couple of meetings, but I know the one that you were talking about on Campus Boulevard is very promising. It seems like that's the furthest along.
That one's probably the easiest because there's right of way that I can go put the trail in.
Yeah.
And there's a high interest from the owners there to do that because people like to go out and walk during their lunch breaks. One of the businesses there actually put a loop on their property. Already had a conversation with them about connecting to that loop, and they're happy to do that. So, I mean, there's some ways to do this, and so it just takes time, and
Oh, I
it's,
understand.
and in some cases, like Ellis Avenues came in a little less than what we thought it was going to, but there's 275,000 just to do that little bit of a project, and that I'm trying to apply that money to a different spot to do another connection. That what's left, we had a $650,000 grant, but I got to get it moved pretty quickly, and it's got to happen next year. And so, we're working through that.
And then this might be, I don't know, maybe not a good question, but is it within this committee's scope to have discussions with the Marple Newtown School District on improving walkability to the schools?
I mean,
Like for children to be able to walk to school better. I mean, seems like an obvious goal, like, it's good for exercise, it's good for community, it's good for getting, traffic off the roads. It seems.
I mean, walkability and general
Walkability and
connectivity
bikeability to
is,
schools, I think,
yeah.
should be a priority.
I mean, it is, and I would say that in the existing plan, I mean, I know right where you live, obviously, I'm on the same road, and I don't know if your kids go to Culbertson.
They do.
Yeah,
They
so,
walk through a mud pit every day.
do they go up on around where they have the two road bollards and walk in that stretch?
Yeah.
And that's like a mud pit?
Yeah, I mean, if it's rained, not now. Now it's been dry.
Yeah, well, we haven't had it in a while, but I know what you mean. It's like a grass driveway through there.
Yeah.
So
Doesn't seem.
Did they not?
when you
fix
come
that
off
this week?
Tyson Road, what's the name of the road when you
Oh,
come
Robbins.
Robinson? When you
yeah.
come off Tyson and you turn right on Robinson as if you're heading towards.
They're
Goshen
changing
Road.
that.
Okay.
To the
That's gonna
right,
be
there's
changed.
like two road bollards and a chain. It's essentially like almost looks like a landscape equipment access road that takes you right in. It's the only way to get into Culbertson where you're not going out on Goshen Road.
Yeah, you don't want the kids to walk.
So what's that? It is, but the kids walk there to go to school all the time. Like my kids will probably do the same thing because I live on the same street. And so I guess, yeah, there might be.
That sounds great if they're planning on improving that soon. And I guess,
I mean, there's nothing on that. I'll say there's nothing on that. There are passing trails that connect to the other schools that are already on the plan on more of the major routes, I'll say.
yeah, the
There's
high
stuff like
school, I
that.
guess it'd be Westchester Pike, and I don't know if I think on the master plan, there was some cutting through the fields there.
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges we have is that when Newtown was first thought about, particularly was in the 50s and in that time frame, as it was developing, the idea was people were moving out here, and the whole big thing was everybody had cars,
Oh, yeah.
right? And they made the decision not to have sidewalks as part of the development. And so when you drive down most of our roads, and you, particularly the areas that are older, there's no sidewalks put in. And now you're coming to the spot that everybody says we want to walk, and so I'm encouraged that everybody wants to walk, but in most of our areas, we've built it without sidewalks. Either the community you're in,
That was
Where's-
developed in the fifties.
it was developed in the fifties, there's no sidewalks,
Right.
right? And so, and you'll see our newer communities, we're requiring them to put in sidewalks, we're requiring them to put in trails, it's all a part of what we're doing. And it's been a big issue some of the developers push back. They don't want to have to do that because
Sure, it's
they didn't, that's not what's consistent with the rest of the township, or they'll tell us that sidewalk goes to nowhere. Well, the sidewalk does go to nowhere, but that was the truth when we put in the sidewalk in front of Uno's, and now we're going to make the connection from Uno's up to where the Goddard School is.
Yeah.
And so it's, but that's 10 years later, right?
Right,
And so people are like, well, get it to happen faster. We can make it happen faster if we want to change taxes and, do those kind of things, but it's expensive, like literally when I say that the 275,000 just to put in that little bit of sidewalk seems like a lot of money to me.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at that, but we're also looking at continuing the other 300 would take the sidewalk here all the way up to the corner of Campus Boulevard. And it stops right now in front of the baseball field.
It's a lot of money, but I think it's money well spent. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a place, especially with the fields. and
People walk it all
library,
the time.
Park, there's, especially kids who have, unless they're gonna be driven around everywhere, have no other
Yeah.
way to get around.
I mean, we got a lot of kids that come here and play ball
Absolutely.
and all of those kind of things. And when you think about that connection, it's really huge in what it connects people to.
Yes.
Because there's sidewalk that goes all the way down Troop Farm. And so you have people that actually cross over and walk that sidewalk and can walk, that would be able to walk from there all the way over to the Ellis Preserve, all the way up to the Meadow Preserve. It's a key piece in helping to make that connection from one side of town to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
then
what
another
yourself.
thing on what you commented was, can you do something that's temporary and then improve upon it? The township has been working, and I don't know where it is exactly, but I know it was fairly close on getting a temporary parking lot put up by the Meadows Preserve. So it makes that more attainable to be able to get people there a lot easier. And I think it was 8 spaces with 1 handicap was the initial plan.
Yeah.
With the potential to expand it to 20 spaces, was it,
Yeah.
John? So that's something that they are doing. It's happening rather soon. That it's exactly in that method, like, let's get something in, we can improve upon it later, but it's something that will be helpful now to get more people to be able to utilize that park. And then on the other side, with Steve said about acquiring the land, that's something that one of our subcommittees has been working on, is trying to get a proposal together to talk with everybody else in the Board of Supervisors, because that is the biggest hurdle, as Mr. Neese said, is we're at that stage now where most of the plans we have cross through the private land, and we want to figure out ways to get easements and access to be able to do it. And personally, I would love it if the Greer to Brookside, because it's connected to our neighborhood, right? Like, I would love that selfishly more than anything, but I know that there are other things the township's working on. They're probably more likely to happen better in a certain time frame. Yeah.
Okay, great. I appreciate the
But you
discussion.
should know that your strategy for sort of quick hits
We're
and
doing-
small wins, instead of taking on
Right, doesn't
all
need fully
the bigger
finished. but
projects
yeah.
with multi-million-dollar price tags and grants associated with them, is a strategy that we've been working on. And there are some proposals out there for some temporary trails, some initial trails, some connectors between trails. And we love that strategy. We've talked a lot about trying to do some smaller wins to really get some things done and to show residents that we're working on it. And those bigger projects are going to come later. They're going to be more long-term. But we are with you and hear you that we would like to get some small wins too.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming, and John, I appreciate it, because I know you've been to at least one of our other meetings before, maybe even a couple, and it's like hearing like specific, things and questions related to what we're doing. This has been a very good conversation, so thank you.
Yeah, I am now needing to go back and meet with PennDOT. I've had a conversation, we've got good response from the neighbors at Lister. But I got some pushback or at least some concern from the folks at Episcopal Academy related to the exit there. And so I told them that I would meet with PennDOT first, which I was going to do anyhow, but so I need to get with PennDOT. We'll be hopefully doing that sometime in the next 30 days and get that, start to address that issue so that we have safety coming in and out of that location.
Okay. All right, now with that, we already talked about items for the next agenda, biggest one being the e-bikes, and then I guess also potentially some education, some different stuff maybe on zoning would be possible. I mean, I don't know what we could actually bring up unless anybody can actually find something specific in which pertain, but I think it's at least something that we can learn more about maybe, but I don't know how to do that, what the best form is. So if it's this meeting or something else.
I mean, I can meet with Steve and just try to understand if we have any documentation in the township on what our current green space requirements are residentially.
That would
and
be helpful.
commercially,
We can-
and I
we can
think
talk
we
about
can
that.
start there.
And then bring it up in the next, bring it up in the next meeting. It's like, hey, here's what we currently have.
Yeah.
And is
so we
this,
understand it.
to Beth's point, is that in line with where we want to be 50 years from now? Or is that a relic from 30 years ago when it was written that we need to, update basically? So that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, so those are the items. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Oh, I'm sorry. Apologies.
We're talking about the budget here, and as I recall, we did decide on, maybe somewhere between $30 and $50 per walk.
That was included in that number that I had.
But then if that per walk, 12 walks a year, and then you also add in the every 6 months, $130 for the stuff fee. That would take you above the figure that you had mentioned. And I'd also like to throw in a bathhouse. I don't know if anybody has ever thought about that, but they have a bathhouse that's clear over at the Kirkwood Preserve. It's brand new. And Beth probably could give us statistics on how many mosquitoes they eat. It's gorgeous. It's all, it's got a Batman logo on it. It's really, really neat.
Do we have them in the Meadow Preserve?
There
I was
are
gonna
some,
say, yeah,
and I actually just did research on this for a presentation, so I know Bad House stuff. I don't know if that would fall more underneath us or EAC. I think it could be easily a joint thing to talk about with them. It could be a Boy Scout project. I mean, there could be ways to kind of get that without having a fee on our end, and there is some research showing there are sizes and styles that are more likely to succeed, and then also location placement and paint color and stuff like that will be more likely to succeed and actually have.
All right, so I messed something up then. I guess I must have missed my notes from the last one where we changed that dollar amount. Yeah, because I want to get this to them by tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Okay, any other items for next meeting that people want to add other than the usual recurring stuff? Okay, so I hear a motion to adjourn.
Good move.
Moved Custer, seconded Danjisha, and all in favor of adjourning, aye.
Aye.
All right, ayes have it. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.